Hi everyone, my name's Alex Hutchinson, a brand new creative director here at Google Stadia. We're here to talk to you today about pitching. Over the last 20 years, from starting off in a strip mall in small town Melbourne, Australia, making handheld games for the Game Boy Advance, all the way through EA to Ubisoft, directing games like Assassin's Creed 3, Far Cry 4, or designing games like Spore and The Sims 2, I've been pitching continually and often throughout the entire development process.
My name is Reed Schneider. I'm a new exec producer here at Stadia. I've been in the games industry over 20 years. So today we're here to talk to you about pitching. And what I'm going to focus on is the production side of the equation and the important elements as you're thinking about how you can structure the production side in order to get great results as you're making your pitch. Over the years, I've had the opportunity to work on a number of games from multiple different genres. Everything from back years ago working on the original Splinter Cell, to Battlefield Vietnam, to Army of Two, to most recently the Arkham Origins, Arkham Knight, and then we just shipped Journey to the Savage Planet as part of Typhoon Studios. And now we're super excited to be part of the Google Stadia team.
To start with, I want to talk a little bit about the origin of the term to pitch. So during the 15th century, a guy called Torquemada was in charge of the Spanish Inquisition. And so the story goes, he would ask playwrights that he'd imprisoned somewhere in Spain to pitch him an idea for a play they wanted to write. And if the play was entertaining enough, he would actually allow them to make it, or allow them to live long enough to make it, or else he would put them back in the boiling oil, where we get the word to pitch from. Is it true? To be honest, I'm not necessarily sure, but ever since I heard this story, it's stuck in my head like a little mind worm, which I think is one of the keys to any great pitch. So as a creative director, pitching is integral to my job. At the very start, you're pitching to yourself, trying to figure out what a good game would entail. Then you're pitching to your team to try and get them excited about the project that you want to make. Then you're usually pitching to the exec staff to convince them that it's something that they want to fund. And then, if you're lucky enough to make it, you're pitching to the press to get them to buy into it. And finally, you're pitching to players to get them to spend their hard-earned cash on the game that you've just made. So in a sense, there's nothing more important than understanding how a good pitch is put together, why it's important, and how you can deliver it to your audience. For us, there are four key elements to any good pitch. The first and most obvious is a good pitch needs a vision. You need to be able to express your idea clearly and efficiently to your audience. The second is it needs to be believable. No one is going to buy into your pitch, even if it's internal and all they're spending is time, or worse, if it's an external publisher and they're investing money, if they don't believe you can actually make the idea that you're pitching. Third, it's all about people. Any pitch is going to be made by your team, not just yourself. So they need to understand who's going to do what and believe that it's actually achievable in the time and under the budget that you've proposed. And finally, you need a pretty clear plan. Lots of people think it's just a high concept, but we found over the years that having a plan right at the start allows people to buy in from day one. I also want us to remember that games are inherently a luxury item. People are never buying your game because they think it will solve a problem. They're not buying it because it's a cheaper version of a problem they already have solved. They're buying it because they want it. Which means that the thing we're really selling is emotions. So the key to any good pitch is to arrive at the emotional core of what you're trying to sell. If you have a shooter, then you want intensity, you want action, you want drama. If you have a narrative game, you want or if you have a romance game, you want the key to the relationships that you're building up. Finding and identifying the key emotion that you're trying to sell, and then articulating how you're going to sell it and how you're going to deliver it to the audience is the primary focus of any good pitch. When we began Journey to the Savage Planet, we had a few specific goals for the game. We wanted to be bright, optimistic. We wanted it to be funny. We wanted it to be cooperative, so you could go on this journey with your best friend or child or partner. We wanted it to be in the action-adventure space, and we wanted it to be set in a crazy alien world. But if you boil it down, the core emotions that we were trying to hit were basically bright, optimistic, and funny. And throughout development, every time we came back to a question of whether we would include a feature or whether we would double down on an element that was working, or whether we would try to fix something that wasn't working, it had to hit one of those 3 points. If it was something that was going to make the player laugh, then we continued with it. If it was going to make sure that we had a world that was bright and upbeat and optimistic, then we'd continue with it. Anything else, if it wasn't working straight off the bat, we would cut and move aside pretty quickly. And then another part of any good pitch is even when you're in the process of talking to people about it, you're actually continually getting feedback, either from their expression or from the questions they ask or from how they talk about your game later on. So it was important for us when we look back on the project to see if it was successful, to see if the audience or if the press actually keyed in on the key elements that we wanted.
So as Alex talked about all the creative elements of the pitch, and those are core. You need to hook people from the start with the creative elements. But as important as the creative elements are, your pitch has to be achievable. It has to be realistic. So now we're going to talk about the production areas of the pitch, which hopefully will give you some tools in order to make your pitch more believable and give you a better chance of success. So as an example, on Journey to the Savage Planet, the pitch was all about focusing on great content. It wasn't about creating lots of crazy new tech, because we knew with the time that we had and the team we were building, it really had to be an exercise in making awesome content that would really appeal to gamers. So as part of thinking about how you can craft a great pitch, I want to introduce you to some creative leaders who've really been able to hone their craft. The first I want to introduce you to is a person named Ed Catmull. Ed Catmull was one of the founders of Pixar. Pixar obviously is known for making incredible content. And in his book, Creativity Inc., he talks about lots of really good lessons for teams, especially game teams. But there's two that I want to point out today. The first one that he talks about is that if you give a great idea to an average team, it's probably going to come out kind of average. But if you give an average idea to a great team, they're going to make it shine, or they're going to come up with a better idea, which is going to make that idea even better. The second idea that Ed talks about a lot in Creativity Inc. is this idea of team chemistry. And in game development, it is such a huge factor with what we do. Chemistry is really everything. So as you're thinking about building your team, and as you're thinking about who those team members who are going to be part of your pitch, you really need to be thinking about how is that team going to work together, because ultimately that's what's going to get you great results. So on Journey to the Savage Planet, we had a team of about 25 people. And one of the reasons that the game came together in the way that it did was because that we put people together who had really, really strong team chemistry. Now, that's not to say that over the whole course of the production, everything was always roses. It's development. There's ups and downs. It's not always going to be that way. But what's important to remember is the chemistry of the team overall worked really well. And I think as you think about what your pitch or what you're pitching to other people, that chemistry is uber important. The next person I want to introduce you to is a scientist named Douglas Hofstadter. Now, if you haven't started already building your game, Douglas Hofstadter knows a hell of a lot more about your game than you do. But what does that really mean? Well, as an example, something that we hear about a lot is what's called Hofstadter's Law. So to boil it down, what that really means in terms of Hofstadter's Law is things are always going to take way longer than they think you're going to take. But as developers, sometimes we're prone to thinking that the best case scenario is what it's going to be. And we need to get into the habit of thinking that, of being realistic with our expectations. And the more realistic you can be with your expectations, the better your pitch is going to be. So this slide's a bit of an exaggeration, and it's highly anecdotal. But what it shows you is that sometimes, as we're thinking about our pitch, we're prone to thinking about what's the best case scenario and everything's going to work well. Again, in game development, there's ups and downs. So really be realistic about how long things are going to take. So, for example, there's the best case scenario, then there's the average estimate, there's the worst case scenario, then there's the worst case scenario where you apply Hofstadter's Law to it, and then there's the actual time something might take. And again, thinking about how long something's going to be realistically going to take as you construct your pitch is going to help you to do a better job, and also to create an environment for your team where they can really succeed. So again, thinking about, as developers, we are prone to thinking, obviously, everything's going to be the best case scenario. But something that also is really interesting is to be aware of that ultimate cognitive bias. And as we think of what that ultimate cognitive bias, I want to talk to you guys a little bit about two scientists. So some of you might have heard this already, but I think it's an interesting reminder. So to start, let's meet David Dunning and Justin Kruger. Now, David Dunning and Justin Kruger are the creators of what's called the Dunning-Kruger principle. So the Dunning-Kruger principle essentially maps out your wisdom on one axis and your confidence and your skill on another. So when we start a pitch, what we're thinking about, or as we start talking about how we're going to build a game, there's what they've affectionately termed the peak of Mount Stupid. So this is where you think you know everything and you think everything is going to go perfectly. And this is actually a really, really dangerous place to be, because this is really the point at when you're just starting to pitch your game. This is unfortunately where all of us generally are. But then you get into what they've also then termed the valley of despair. So things are down. It's hard to understand. It's hard to understand exactly where you are and are things going to work out. But then slowly but surely you climb what they've called the slope of enlightenment. Now, of course, these are all exaggerations. The truth of the matter is there's a normal mastery curve that flows throughout this whole process. But again, as we think about how you're going to create this pitch that ultimately is successful, think about these things in terms of how long it's really going to take you to get the results you want and how to get the best results for your team. And also, probably most importantly, is how to create a sustainable environment for your team where you're not burning anyone out and you can get the best results. So, as game developers, let's talk about what were sort of the old school kind of traditional production timelines. So maybe you'd have 3 months in a conception period, another 3 months in a pre-production period. And maybe you might have 9 months in the full production period. And then what unfortunately would tend to happen a lot is that your alpha, beta, and shipping would be squeezed down to a short amount of time. Let's assume that for 3 months. The problem with this model is that you really get all of your points in post-production, or post-production meaning that alpha to beta period. So that's really where things come together and you can refine and you can make smart choices in terms of how to get the best results for your project and how to create an awesome game experience for your players. So what I'd like you to think about now is trying to take that old model out of your head. But Reed, what should we do about this? Like, how can we think about this? Well, to start, as an example, throwing lots of people at a specific problem all at once is not going to get you the results you want. An analogy we like to think about is imagine trying to have tons of people trying to cram through one door at one time. You end up with it's messy, you end up with a lot of collisions, people don't necessarily know where they're trying to get to, and it doesn't give you the best results. So how should we do that? Well, from our perspective, we think it's really about thinking about your schedule in a realistic and sustainable way. So what does that mean exactly? Well, what that means is, let's take Savage Planet as an example. So as you're building your pitch, one of the things that would be really, really helpful for you, again, thinking about something that's achievable and realistic and something that's going to make a model that your team can actually believe in and is sustainable, is thinking about your development in essentially 3 buckets. Your bucket 1 being conception and pre-production, bucket 2 meaning your production, and bucket 3 meaning post-production. So for us, post-production was the time period where we had a full alpha of the game. Now the alpha was what we called, it was dirty. I mean, there was bugs, it was hard to understand, but what it allowed us to do is to take a step back and look at everything we had and then decide what was good, what to invest in, and where to double down, and where to cut things and where to remove things. So the end of the production period for us resulted in that full alpha.
Looking back over the years at the various pitches and trying to identify those that have worked the most, I think the key is to find as focused a niche as you can and then attack it directly. The way that boils down in practice is each of the games that I've worked on has essentially come with 3 big bets of new features or elements that we want the players to focus on that have then allowed us to focus all of our development and to really double down on what we think is going to make this game unique and important and interesting to the player. So we talked a little bit before about Journey to the Savage Planet. The things that were important there were bright, colorful, optimistic, and exploration, really as the 3 big elements that we pursued. And even though it's a small game, and even though various elements we cut or moved away from that core, I think those 3 elements are still trying very hard to be top of class. With Assassin's Creed 3, the 3 elements we were targeting were a brand new setting in the American Revolution and a brand new hero for players. It was naval exploration and naval combat, and it was natural free running, so allowing the player to explore wilderness environments as well as cities. And I think if you look back on the game and how it was received, those 3 elements come up in every review. Those 3 elements come up in every piece of player feedback, and I think they were key to bringing a huge new audience to the franchise. So I hope that gives you a little bit of an insight into how we structure our pitches. The idea of focusing on some key ingredients that build emotions, building a team around it that can execute it, and giving yourself a believable schedule. But I wanted to finish with something a little more personal, a Post-it note that's been stuck on my desk now for 20 years or thereabouts, which is WSAGAF. And it's not very googly, but what it stands for is, why should anyone give a f***? And it's something I use as a razor, as a filter to think about every decision that I pitch to someone. Every time I ask someone to do work on a feature or the game, is that it needs to be building an emotion in not only the player eventually, but in the person working on that feature. If we're not getting a reaction from people, then it's probably something that's not worth your time. But either way, I really hope this short and sharp video has given you an insight into how we work. And I wish you the best of luck in your future pitches.